Welcome, everybody, to Soccer 101. My name is Taylor Rockwell, and as always, I'm joined by my friend and yours, Mr. Kiwi himself. It's Graham Ruffin. Graham, congratulations. You are from New Zealand for this episode.
Oh, I'm quite happy with that. I've never been to New Zealand, but it looks like a beautiful country. Do you think The Athletic know that part of the deal of us doing this series was that they have to pay for us to visit every single country that we're doing? I mean, Iran last time, that might not work out too well for us, but as I say, New Zealand looks like a great country. Yeah. So when are we going?
Dibs on not being the one to go to Iran. Between Scotland and the United States, I feel like you're going to have the better of the times there. But I do look forward to our eventual invoice and The Athletic being basically broken and financially destitute because of this journey. But it was worth it, Graham, because we are continuing our series discussing the leagues of national teams that have qualified for the 2026 World Cup. I will say this. We're quickly running out of teams that have qualified for the World Cup. We need some more to get through. We have talked about Japan and Iran. It's time to get into New Zealand, a nation with its own intricacies and confusions when it comes to league soccer, Graham.
Yeah, absolutely. This league system is kind of nuts.
A little bit.
I also like it at the same time. Once you get your head around it, it makes some sense. But I have to admit, it took me about 15 to 20 minutes to truly understand. And I've written a little bit about soccer in New Zealand this season because Auckland FC, and we'll come on to this in this episode, Auckland FC are an expansion team in the Australian A-League, and they are top of the table after 24 games. So I've written a little bit about them this season, but New Zealand has its own domestic league ecosystem, which is where things get a little bit more complicated.
When we discussed doing this in the first place, Graham, I think your analogy was Canada, basically, where you have probably the top professional teams playing in the U.S. League, the North American League, obviously, but Major League Soccer is primarily an American league, and then they have their own domestic league as well, which is maybe at a different level, but does still exist and does still produce talent.
Yeah, absolutely right. And in New Zealand, it's called the New Zealand National League. It was founded 4 years ago in 2021. It was a successor to...
A storied history since 2021.
Yeah. Well, there was a league before that. It was called the New Zealand Football Championship. Really imaginative with these names they are in New Zealand. They've gone from the National League to the Football Championship, or from the Football Championship. That was founded 20 years before that. But in 2021, there was this big reorganisation of soccer in New Zealand. This is where things get a little bit complicated, a little bit different. There is a regional ground level of soccer in New Zealand, and it's been that way for decades. And as far as I can tell, it's regional because you have small clubs with not a lot of financial backing, and you have a country that might not be the biggest country in the world by landmass, but it's split into islands, and there are some challenging logistical issues in travelling between games. So they reorganised the regional leagues into, and this is in 2021, they renamed them the Northern League, the Central League, and the Southern League. And this is where it gets really interesting. Every club plays in one of those regional leagues for the first phase of the season. From that phase, that regional phase, the best teams in each of the regional leagues then qualify for a second phase, which is a national phase, and they call it the championship phase, where they take 10 teams from the three regional phases, put them in a second league table, and as if that wasn't weird enough, they have a 9-game season, single table, but they then have a grand final between the first and second place teams, and that is their national champions. So I have never encountered a league format like this anywhere else. It's kind of like if MLS still had its conferences, but the conferences didn't play each other until you reach the postseason. And the playoffs is then a league table, but with MLS Cup also thrown in there for a laugh.
Graham, this is more or less what I have proposed as how you incorporate promotion relegation in the United States and how you make it work. I think I've always said you do it as clausura apertura, and I think that is the major drawback. I like the way they do it, of basically not having that break. You have the regional leagues, then you have... 4 teams from the Northern League, 3 from the Central League, 2 from the Southern League. 1 spot is reserved for the Wellington Phoenix Reserves to add some more nuance into that one. And that would be your National League, and then you play that one at the end of the regional season. Then you have the grand final between the top 2 teams in that one. But I like that idea a lot because I think it cuts down on travel costs. It helps with some of the kind of geographic challenges in the United States, but certainly in New Zealand as well. I think it's a really great system, and I kind of want the U.S. to embrace it. But it's also kind of weird because then you do still have the A-League with New Zealand teams playing there. But let's not talk about that yet. let's continue to talk about the New Zealand Men's National League, the Dettol Men's National League. I don't know what Dettol is.
Dettol. Oh, do you not know
what?
I love that about this, by the way. So Dettol is like a antibacterial cleaner here in the UK that I presume they also have in New Zealand.
So it'd be like Mr. Clean National League? Okay,
I love it. It's one of the best league sponsors that I've ever encountered. I jumped for joy when I read that Dettol sponsors this league. I don't know why that made me so happy, but it does. It's just, normally it's like a bank, or like in France it's a fast food thing always, or
milk.
Or crypto. New Zealand, it's a cleaning product.
I love New Zealand. I do indeed. And then you've got from the championship phase, which is what all the kind of regional leagues play into. The top two teams there qualify for the OFC Champions League, the continental competition of the Oceania region. And I kept seeing, this is again my brain being my brain, I kept seeing that like it's consistently ranked as one of the strongest leagues in New Zealand or in Oceania, and it's one of the most successful leagues in Oceania. And I was like, wow, that's an achievement, until I remembered that it is far and away the dominant league by some distance in Oceania.
Yes, and Australia in football terms is not considered part of Oceania. Right. They are part of Asian football. They're part of the AFC. So there are some things that the OFC are trying to do to put in place infrastructure to improve the development of not just soccer in New Zealand but throughout the region. We'll come on to that a little bit later. There's a new league that they are launching that I've written about for the newsletter. But yes, New Zealand is very much the dominant force when it comes to Oceania football.
And I think there's interesting ways of developing the game within that domestic league. 4 international players are allowed on the team, but then you can add a 5th if they are from the Confederation. Players aged 20 or younger must account for 10% of available playing minutes throughout the season. So there is a requirement to play young players. There was a requirement or an allowance for Oceania players, so you are theoretically developing younger players and more players from the region to help kind of strengthen soccer in the Confederation. Whether or not that is having a sizable impact is up for debate. Let's talk about some teams that are having sizable impacts, Graham. Who are some of the more dominant teams in the New Zealand League?
So Auckland City are, I think you would say, the predominant force in New Zealand football. They've won more titles than any other team in New Zealand. They've won 10 over the course of their history. They're the defending champions. They're also the team that won the OFC Champions League this season. That actually happened just a couple of weeks ago. I put that in the newsletter. So they are a big club by this measure. You're looking at other teams that have won titles. I mean, part of the issue here is a lot of the teams that were dominant in the 70s, so I'm looking at Uni Mount Bohemian, have won 6 titles, but they are a team that no longer play in this league structure. I think they're still an amateur team. You've got Christchurch United as well. They've won 6 titles. They won 3 in the 70s, 3 in the 80s. Again, an amateur team, don't play in this division. So in terms of teams that are still in this league, you've got Napier City Rovers have won it 4 times. Haven't won it since the year 2000 though, so maybe not recently. You've got Eastern Suburbs who won it in 2018-19. And then the other team that I would mention as a kind of dominant force would be Wellington Olympic. Yep. So you have, obviously they're the 2 cities, the big cities in New Zealand. Particularly when it comes to soccer, they are 2 hubs of New Zealand soccer. So in Auckland you have Auckland City, you have Auckland United, you have Eastern Suburbs, you have... Oh, wow, this kind of seems like an indigenous name. Manu Rewa. I've almost certainly not pronounced that correctly. And then you've got Wellington teams, Wellington Olympic, Wellington Phoenix, which is the A-League team as I understand it, although there is that wrinkle of their reserves play in this league, so maybe that's why they're listed in this list that I'm looking at. And then you've got Petone as well, who are a Wellington team. So there are 2 big hubs that are pretty dominant in this league structure.
Yep. And to spend some more time on those 2 clubs, Auckland City, you mentioned, have had plenty of success winning the Northern League 4 out of 4 seasons. Not bad for them. Going back 15 years, I don't believe they've spent a single bit of money on a transfer. They've also never received a fee for a transfer. So you're seeing, I think, a lot of movement of players at the end of campaigns, but it seems to be almost to the level of amateur teams, how at the end of a competitive amateur season, players will kind of jump to different teams based on where they like playing time, available minutes, maybe who they're playing with, or the quality of coaching or what have you. So I think that is an interesting one, but also maybe speaks to the standard of play.
Yeah.
And then go ahead, Graham.
No, I was just going to say that reminds me of the leagues that I watch every single weekend, where you have, I was reading that there is a mix of full-time and part-time, not just full-time and part-time teams in this league, but within the one team there will be some part-time players and some full-time players, and that is very reminiscent of like the Scottish Third Division or the maybe even the Scottish Fourth Division. What you were just saying there, Taylor, is exactly what happens in like Stirling Albion's league and the lower leagues in Scotland, where players have 1-year contracts, 2-year contracts, but at the end of those contracts, money doesn't really change hands. Even within those contracts, like clubs will let players just like leave if they're not using them. So it seems like that's the closest comparison that I can think of. I mean, some of these clubs do get millions from FIFA when they play in the Club World Cup or in the OFC Champions League. So like Auckland City, I'd imagine their revenue is like far greater than a lot of the lower league Scottish teams that I'm talking about. But I can't even sort of rank it globally in terms of the quality, because I think there might be like 100 global leagues ahead of the New Zealand National League, to be honest, in terms of quality.
I think that's probably fair. Yeah, because even like USL League One, which is third division here in the States, like even their guys aren't being paid super well, and I think are usually augmenting that with coaching or private lessons and the like. But I remember like going back to the 90s, Kickers players, like more than half the team had day jobs and then would show up to training or show up to games from their day jobs, like sometimes still in their work uniform. You see significantly less of that these days. So even there is kind of a gap. But I think there are still teams that are really interesting or really noteworthy. The other one that we've already talked about was Wellington Olympic, who have been plenty successful in the Central League. Reading about them, originally founded by Greek immigrants in 1953. They are still known as the Greeks. They have sizable support from the local Greek population, and a significant number of their players have Greek heritage. They won the grand final in 2023. They've been twice runners-up. So some strong teams within the domestic league. How they rank internationally is up for some debate. Graham, in looking at individual players in the league, did the name Garbin Coughlin come up on your list? Because I have questions.
It may have. It didn't stick in the memory. What is it with this player that stands out?
32-year-old striker from Limerick, Ireland. He has made 64 appearances for Kashmir Technical. He has scored 101 goals.
Here he is.
He was the MVP of the league in 2023, joint top scorer in each of the last three seasons. 100-plus goals in 64 appearances is a somewhat decent rate of return. Well done, Garbin Coughlin.
Yeah, I'm just looking at his scoring records now. I mean, it was fairly decent throughout his career. Where else did he play? Oh, he's been in New Zealand for a while, actually. He had a good scoring record for Southern United as well. But I'm looking at this one. It's 29 and 47. Man, for Kashmir Technical, which, by the way, top name. Some of the names of the clubs in this league are tremendous. That's decent. 101 and 64.
It's a merged one. It's another club that merged, and they were Kashmir something and something technical, and merged together to become
Woolston
Kashmir Technical. There you go.
Kashmir Wanderers and Woolston Technical.
Yes. I wonder if the Wanderers needed a stadium. The technical brains had the stadium, so they dropped the Wanderers once they got the stadium and became Kashmir Technical. That's how I'm choosing to believe that played out. So that is the domestic league in New Zealand, but then you also have two clubs now competing in the A-League in Australia, though they are based in New Zealand, and that's where the Canadian comparison really kind of comes into focus.
Yeah, absolutely. So, by the way, if anyone is interested, Taylor and I did a 101 last year, maybe even the year before that, on the A-League. It was last year. It had to be last year, right? It surely wasn't 2020.
Time is a flat circle. Who knows?
Time is a flat circle. You're right. But if anyone's interested in the A-League, go back, scroll through and listen to that episode that we did. But you're right, Taylor. There are two New Zealand clubs in that league. You've got Wellington Phoenix, and as of this season, you've got Auckland FC, who have joined the A-League as an expansion team. Auckland FC are owned by Bill Foley, who is the Bournemouth owner, and they have been very ambitious with some of their signings. They have been getting big crowds of like close to 30,000 this season. They have the largest average attendance in the A-League this season, 17,000. You contrast that to, I really struggle to find like reliable attendance figures for the New Zealand National League. So I tried to look at some highlights to try and get an idea of how many people were at these games. I caught one of Auckland City's games from a couple of weeks ago. If I had to guess, it's a pretty small attendance. It looked like maybe 500, 600 people were at that game. And look, that might grow as you move into the championship phase and you get the national games. These were the regional games that I was watching. So clearly Auckland FC are doing things on a bigger scale than even Auckland City for all the success that they've had over the decades. And as I kind of talked about at the start of the episode, Auckland FC are top of the A-League right now after 24 games. Keep in mind they're an expansion team, so that's an incredible achievement. They do have a playoff series in the A-League, so they're going to win the regular season. They might not end up as the Australian champions, but they've got a 6-point advantage at the top of the table. They have been leading the table pretty much from the start of the season when they started with this absolutely incredible run. Taylor, do you know who Auckland FC's starting goalkeeper is?
Yes, I do. Vindication, sort of.
The one and only Alex Paulson from our draft. So
for people who have no idea why I'm excited about a goalkeeper you have almost certainly never heard of, we did a draft on Total Soccer Show a long time, and the conditions were basically you were drafting an 11-a-side team. It was myself, Graham, and Joe, but the rule was that you had to have representation from every single confederation. So you had to have an Oceania player in there. Graham, I think, with the first pick, took Liberato Cacere, or whatever his name is.
Possibly. If you say so, I cannot remember.
I can't remember his name,
right.
But he was the only one from New Zealand who was playing at a relatively high level.
Yeah.
I went with the goalkeeper that I found to be most promising and was roundly mocked for it, specifically by Joe, and that was Alex Paulson. And yet here he is on loan from Bournemouth. You never know. Maybe he ends up playing in the Premier League, but is also playing for the best team in the A-League. I feel vindicated. Clearly my team is now the best team.
Yeah,
none of the other positional mistakes that I made matter at all. It's
retrospective vote, I think, is in order for this.
There we go.
Yeah, so a ghost from our past, from our TSS past, Alex Paulson has come up in this episode, and I was trying to find out what the idea was behind having these two New Zealand leagues in the league was. The idea seemed to be to grow soccer in the country, and the fact of the matter is that the A-League has a level of financial backing and organisation and standing that domestic football in New Zealand just doesn't. And the A-League has had its financial issues. We covered that in our 101 episode that we did. But it's still at a much higher commercial and even sporting level. The standard is obviously a lot higher in that league. So it's similar to the argument that was made when Toronto and Vancouver and Montreal were introduced into MLS. The flip side of that argument, of course, is that by having the biggest clubs in another country's league system, they're potentially pulling up the drawbridge. That's the other side of that argument. But the reality of the situation is that Wellington Phoenix, are owned by a consortium of rich business people. Auckland FC, as I say, are owned by Bill Foley. There was also previously the New Zealand Knights in the A-League, who were, I think, like the Tampa Bay Mutiny equivalent. They folded after a little while, but they had wealthy backers as well. And the reality is that these people want their club to be in the biggest, most prosperous league possible, and that's the A-League, because New Zealand is a smaller country. It doesn't have the same soccer infrastructure. There's not the same level of interest. In New Zealand, soccer is the third most popular sport behind rugby and cricket, and I think it's rugby, big gap, cricket, big gap, soccer. And obviously that might be the same in Australia, but there's just more people in Australia, so it can sustain a larger league.
And kind of similar to the United States, at least as I understand it, is that in New Zealand it is a very popular sport for playing, for kids to play. It's played in schools, it's played in public and private schools, but also there are different clubs and the like. But I think as kids age up, maybe rugby becomes more prevalent, more appealing, and then certainly as a spectator sport, it seems like rugby commands much more attention.
I know almost nothing about rugby, but I know enough to know that New Zealand are like the Brazil of rugby.
Yeah, they're right.
So it's almost like a self-perpetuating thing, like the All Blacks as the rugby team. So it's like this self-perpetuating thing where if you have the best rugby team in the world, everyone's, particularly in a country of only 5 million people, it's easy to command that interest from everyone in the country. So rugby's just all dominant.
And at first, Graham, when I was looking at the to go back to the domestic league for a moment, the New Zealand Dettel, right? The Dettel Men's National League, Auckland City. I was like, wow, they're really well represented in the national team. There's so many players from Auckland City. There's not. It's Auckland FC,
no,
and that is and that was, I think, the other thing that made the Canada comparison even more fitting is that with the Canada national team, I think you will occasionally have players from like Canadian Premier League teams called into camps, or maybe there will be camps that tend to focus more on domestic players, but very few of those players are actually playing for the national team, and even fewer are playing multiple times for the national team, and that seems to be the case with New Zealand. The majority of their national team playing either in the A-League or abroad.
Yeah, if you look at the most recent New Zealand national team squad, not a single player out of 26 is playing for a New Zealand National League team at this moment in time. I went back through their call-ups from the last 2 years. Could not find a player from a New Zealand National League team. You've got like some players who have come through the domestic league. So Chris Wood, the famous Chris Wood, the Premier League's I don't know, what would you call him? New Ronaldo, New Haaland? Can he take that title? But he played for anything goes with him this season. You could say anything, and you'd have to agree. He played for Hamilton Wanderers, who play in the Northern League. Michael Boxall played for Auckland City, who is obviously playing in MLS for Minnesota, I think. But even then, you go through the careers of these national team players, and look, I couldn't go through every single one of them, but I went through a good number of them. You're talking about maybe 7 or 8 out of 26 to 30 players have had links to domestic league. Like, not even, it's with Chris Wood, he played, that was like his youth days, was playing for Hamilton Wanderers, then he moves on very quickly. It doesn't seem like it's a league that has a very strong pathway into the national team. They might have those quotas for young players, but I just think the A-League is miles ahead, and it's close enough that if you're a young player in New Zealand, you're probably thinking, why would I go to a New Zealand National League team when I can just go into an A-League academy and cut out the middleman there? And I think that it's similar to Canada, where I think the best prospects are just always going to end up with the Vancouver Whitecaps or CF Montreal or Toronto in their youth systems.
And that is totally true, and also I think furthers the idea that New Zealand football is in a bit of a conundrum, is in a bit of a tight spot, basically, because, like, yes, now there's a second team playing in the A-League, and you theoretically have more opportunity than you've had before. Conversely, you basically have 2 teams in 2 of the biggest cities that then everybody is going to be trying to play for, and it actually in some ways limits competition and limits how many players can come through that pathway and actually be developed and be in those academies. And so I think, as with so many things we've talked about with different leagues and with soccer in general, solutions oftentimes then create problems of their own, and really there are a number of problems facing New Zealand football, the largest of which is just finding ways to stay competitive and grow the game within their region, because now you have the expanded World Cup, you have one guaranteed slot for Oceania at every single World Cup, and even if that is New Zealand every single time, which feels pretty likely with the kind of balance of power as it is from a footballing perspective, I've seen plenty of New Zealand Reddit accounts complaining about how, like, great, that means we blow everybody out in qualifying and then have 3 meaningful games every 4 years. And it does sort of speak to the lack of development opportunities, but then even if you do come through, how few opportunities you have to kind of have meaningful competition at a national team level if you are playing in New Zealand in Oceania.
Yeah, there's such a big disconnect between not only the New Zealand domestic league and then the national team, but then the quality of New Zealand soccer as a whole, and then the rest of Oceania as well. So New Zealand are almost stuck in the middle of this situation where the infrastructure in places like Papua New Guinea or New Caledonia or the Solomon Islands or Fiji or Tahiti or wherever is not even up to the standards of what they have in New Zealand. And I've watched some of these games. I've tried to do a bit more research on what the infrastructure actually is. And there's some good training facilities there. I think there's a national training facility in Auckland. Auckland FC's, like, the A-League facilities look pretty good. Some of the stadiums look pretty nice. But looking at the attendances and, like, things like the TV deal, Sky had the broadcast rights for the first 2 seasons of this new structure that started in 2021. And this was hailed as this, like, game-changing moment for domestic New Zealand football. It didn't get the viewership that they expected. Sky pulled out after 2 seasons, and now games are streamed for free on FIFA's streaming platform, which is called FIFA Plus, who, for anyone who doesn't know, is a sort of like dumping ground for leagues that basically can't attract any broadcast rights offers. And those are the domestic rights as well. We're not just talking about the international rights. Like,
of course it's called FIFA Plus. Of course it's called FIFA Plus.
I've used FIFA Plus, Taylor. It's a wild place. Like, the San Marino League is on there when I was writing the newsletter about San Marino. I think the Vatican City League is in there as well, which is a fascinating league, one of my favourite newsletters that I've written. So that's where the New Zealand National League lives, and there are some plans in place to try and bridge the gap here. So the OFC is starting up an Oceania Super League next year, which is going to be officially called the OFC Professional League, and they are basically taking applications for this league right now. And the idea is to give Oceania a more professional, organised, more prosperous league system, and New Zealand's going to be a core part of that. And FIFA has pledged $10 million to this new league. It'll initially be 8 clubs. It's going to run from January until May. It's going to run alongside the New Zealand National League. Where I'm a little bit confused about this is it sounds very much like an OFC Champions League replacement, but that is going to continue. But there is this idea that gradually over time this new Super League will become the main focus for these clubs. There's 8 places right now. I think they've had like 25 applications. Interestingly, they've had applications from teams in Australia as well. So that's a big debate, as well as if the purpose of this league is to bridge the gap between Oceania and the Australian League, why would you then have Australian clubs come into this division? But there are a number of Australian clubs who feel that they've been left behind by the A-League. Imagine like USL clubs applying to this new kind of continental league that is going to happen next January. It's going to happen next year. This is something that is pretty much set in stone at this point. So I'm interested to see if that has kind of any impact, because obviously with our Eurocentric minds we think Super League equals bad. But in this case, if it leads to more money coming into this league, which you then hope trickles down to these clubs and they can do more at grassroots and more with their infrastructure, then that could be a good thing.
Speaking very much as an outsider, and like maybe an ugly American at that for the purposes of this question, Graham, where are you on the idea that Oceania should just merge with AFC?
For New Zealand, that would be great. For the rest of Oceania, I'm not so sure, because I do kind of think they might just become whipping boys. I don't know if there's a way where you could have like regional qualification that then feeds into Asia, into like the AFC process. That's probably that's a happy medium. That's probably a compromise.
That's what CONCACAF does, right? Where you have like the Caribbean Football Union and Central American Football Union, and
that's right.
Find ways
what
to
happens.
Do it.
Yeah. So I would be on board. I mean, I've not thought about it until this very moment. Maybe someone will poke holes in this, but it seems like a good idea.
I mean, that seems to be the prevailing opinion. Either that, or you like redivide AFC and you move like Southeast Asian teams into Oceania, where they maybe have more like island nations would have more connections to each other, but that feels unlikely for a number of reasons. Largest of which is I doubt AFC wants to lose any members or have a number of their members join another confederation solely for the purpose of making that confederation better or theoretically better. Merging seems like the most logical thing. But yeah, then you totally have like federations that are never going to get better because they are just going to be the whipping boys, even in some of those regional competitions. So it's the conundrum of Oceania, and on the one hand, having that automatic spot solves the problem of countries leaving, because to my understanding, that's basically why Australia left Oceania in the first place. Is like, yes, we're guaranteed a half qualifying spot, but then we still have to play another country, and it's kind of a crapshoot as to whether or not we get through. But that also means that we're not really developing. We're not playing in the Asian Champions League. So we're gonna leave, and we're gonna try to kind of seek out greener pastures. And I feel like New Zealand might soon be confronted with a similar conundrum.
Yeah, it's a tough sell for the AFC teams who are being told you're leaving. If it came to it, you're leaving this confederation to go to a confederation with worse teams, less money, and you're having to travel half the world to go to away games, which is like that's a real world challenge for soccer in Oceania. Is you're talking about islands that are spread so far apart, and none of those islands have the population base so that these teams have a lot of money, because they don't have huge attendances. So how do you then pay for the travel to go to these games? So that's why the OFC has kind of gone to Gianni Infantino. And look, we talk all sorts of stuff about Gianni Infantino on this show and on the main feed, and there's plenty of reason to. But one of his plus point says he does seem to be quite generous and open-minded to kind of new league structures in kind of far-flung corners of the world. And this new Super League has drawn the backing of FIFA. They'll probably need more than $10 million, I was reading. They're already pledging, or they're already kind of lobbying to get double that for the next 5 to 10 leagues to sustain this league. But that is kind of where, I'm okay with FIFA's money going to that. $20 million, I am happier with that than it going to a 64-team Saudi Arabian World Cup, because it seems like that might actually improve soccer in a region of the world where things are a little bit difficult.
We hold the Club World Cup in Oceania? Yeah? Does that do it?
I mean, on a beach, I would go. Yeah. Or maybe they could buy an island. Maybe that's what money's being used for.
That feels like a more Infantino solution. I should know this, but I do not. Will there be an Oceania representative at the 2025 Club World Cup? Do you know?
That is a good question. I do not. I mean, I don't think FIFA knows
Auckland
who's going to be playing in
City. Auckland City, the best OFC Champions League winners in the OFC 4-year ranking. That would be Auckland City. So they will be there playing the likes of Chelsea and Real Madrid and Manchester City and PSG, and of course Inter Miami, who qualified by existing, I believe.
Yeah, I mean,
they're listed as host on the FIFA site. That's how Inter Miami qualified.
Great stuff.
Okay.
I mean, are Auckland City sure that they're not going to have to play a Mexican team in a playoff to re-earn their place in this competition?
Sadly, it's Costa Rica. That's what they have to do, and that could be a problem because Costa Rica tends to do okay at home. So it seems like if we're doing the State of the Union, state of New Zealand football, is it about as it's been? Do you feel like it is on sure footing or more solid ground? I think we've drawn the Canadian comparison. I would say it feels to me a little bit like soccer in the United States around the 94 World Cup, where it's there are revisions to the domestic league to make it stronger. In the U.S.'s case, to make a domestic league exist in a standardized fashion. You have some players playing abroad, but none maybe really kicking into the top tiers, even if you do have Chris Wood scoring plenty of goals and being a legend. So it feels to me like they are in a, not quite a holding pattern, but about where it seems like they want to be. There is going to be interest for New Zealand at the World Cup. There will always be enthusiasm for them when they do well, as they did in 2010. The undefeated 2010 World Cup is how it tends to be discussed. But at the same time, if things don't go well, it doesn't feel like it's the end of the day, whereas maybe losing at rugby is going to be much more of a national reckoning.
Yeah, I don't think they know what their domestic league is meant to be right now, as my reading of things. I think in terms of the national team is probably in quite a good position. I mean, that World Cup, that guaranteed World Cup spot is huge for New Zealand. They haven't been, you said 2010, they were at that World Cup. Mm-hmm. They haven't been at a World Cup for a long time. And so going forward in this new 48-team format, that's going to change, because you would think New Zealand are going to qualify through OFC every single time. And so you wonder what the knock-on effect of that might be in terms of building interest, where they have a World Cup every 4 years to generate interest in a rugby-mad country. I think also the two A-League teams being the two New Zealand teams being in the A-League has also had a positive impact, whereas you say you look through that national team and there are a good number of Auckland FC players in that team right now. There's a couple of Wellington Phoenix players in there as well. So I think there's a lot that's gone right for New Zealand football, for soccer in New Zealand, but that domestic league just seems to lack a bit of purpose at the moment, and that's where you have the OFC Super League coming in. And I think those clubs, if they're being candid, if they're being truthful, hope that league is so successful that maybe the domestic, you know how it's the Wellington Phoenix reserves that play in that league at the moment? Well, maybe 10 years down the line, that's the Auckland City reserves that are playing in that league. So there is always a domestic presence, but I think there's an acceptance that they might need to look outside the box for how to progress the domestic game.
In terms of the three leagues we've discussed then, are you with me in putting the J-League number 1?
Correct.
The Persian Gulf Pro League number 2, and then the Mr. Clean Dettel Men's National League number 3?
Yeah, to be honest, I think big gap below the Persian Gulf Pro League and then the New Zealand National League. Which, look, I watch dreadful soccer every single weekend by going to see Stirling Albion, so I'm not trying to belittle these teams.
I keep making you watch Manchester United, and it's my fault. I apologize.
Yeah, I mean, amazingly, Taylor, Stirling Albion are still a lot worse than Manchester United. But yeah, I don't mean that to belittle anyone or any team or any set of fans. But yeah, just being real about it, it's not the highest quality of league.
Do you trust your goalkeeper more than I trust Andre Onana?
Yes, actually.
There you go.
Gaston.
All right. Found a way to make myself sad at the end of this one. But Graham, thank you. I really am enjoying these. I'm really loving these episodes because I like learning about these leagues. And I think even with like the kind of, I think, negative conclusions that we might draw or might feel about some aspects of New Zealand football, ultimately, I really enjoy learning about like the restructuring that it has gone through since 2021 with the 3 different like leagues, and then how they move into the national competition, which leads to the grand final. I really enjoy how there are structures in place to, I think, get more teams playing more consistently with more players and have it grow kind of domestically in its appeal. And so I think it's just like learning more about that, learning about what steps are being taken in countries that we wouldn't otherwise discuss, or if we do, it's from a how will they do at the World Cup, how will their national team do perspective. I like learning about these things. Yeah. I don't know if I will extend that to the Vatican City League, but I'm not going to lie. I have circled that as a potential 101 episode because I have many questions.
Well, if they qualify for the 2026 World Cup, I don't know how their qualification campaign is going on. I think the only other team that isn't a host nation that's qualified is Argentina. So maybe that one is on the docket immediately. After that, we might need to wait for another window to happen for a few more teams to punch their ticket.
Counterpoint, there are certainly episodes to be done on the domestic leagues of Canada and Mexico. So we could throw those in there too. I guess the United States as well. There's some things to talk about there.
Yeah, there's always... That's the great thing about soccer, and that's the reason I kind of started the newsletter, was there's stories everywhere. Like, even in this league, this New Zealand National League that we've been talking about, yeah, the quality's not the highest, but you're talking about Wellington Olympic and the way that they reflect their community, like the Greek community that they have, and some of the other clubs in this league as well, like reflect the indigenous community that they have in like the Northern League and so on. So there's just always interesting stuff in all of these leagues all around the world that give them a unique culture and a unique identity, and hopefully these episodes are doing a little bit to cast a light on them.
How many goals did Pope Francis get in the Vatican Premier League?
So Pope Francis, I did a newsletter story about...
He's Argentine, man. I used to know his team. It's not Newell's.
He's San Lorenzo. San Lorenzo, isn't
he? Yeah.
He was a season ticket holder. But he was lobbying for the Vatican City to apply to join UEFA, which is a real thing. That's what the newsletter. He met with Ceferin or Platini, was it? It might have been a little while ago. Maybe. But that was a thing that he wanted to happen.
It's another win for Scotland, theoretically.
I don't know. Like the breakup of Yugoslavia added a lot of other teams to UEFA that were better than us. Maybe Vatican City would be another one that would finish ahead of us in qualification.
A sleeping giant in their population of 12. Yeah, I think you'll be okay. Who knows? But until we talk about the Vatican City League, Graham, I look forward to talking about more World Cup domestic leagues. I got to find a better way to explain this one. For now, thank you for spending some time talking about New Zealand with me today.
Thank you, Taylor Rockwell.
Listeners, thank you all as well very much, and we look forward to talking to you again next week.